of Jesus, Colossians 1:17, by him are all things held together. And there it is.
Well, we've got a special guest coming in on the second hour, Mr. Ron Brumbarger, excuse me. And he is an entrepreneur, and so both of these hours are going to be very intense for me, being an educator and an entrepreneur. So we're going to start it off like we started off and give us about 7 8 minutes. We're going to come back after some great music, and then we're going to dive right into education, the lack of, the need of, and what we can do to help our community.
There
you
you
are
go.
listening to Warp and Woof Radio on Cool Groove Radio. RadioNext.TV, Warp and Woof Radio on the Cool Groove site. Dr. Mark Echo, Harold H.B. Bell in the house, and we are going to be diving into education. And Mark, I appreciate this format today. Most of the time we like to get right in, and we talk from Proverbs, principles of Proverbs in this show every week. But we decided to just kind of freestyle today as we talk about education, because we know the model or models are relative to different communities, different people, different demographics. So it's important that we continue to talk about it so we can at least try to come to some kind of nucleus in how we get along in this community. The first thing I do want to say is that where wisdom and life connect is what Comenius Institute and the Warp and Woof philosophy is. And so we're talking education, and Proverbs speak life to education.
Isn't that the
Talk about
truth?
it for a minute.
Sure. Well, we got to go to Proverbs every single week, so let me read some verses here from Proverbs chapter 2. My son, if you receive my words, treasure up my commands with you, make your ear attentive to wisdom, incline your heart to understanding. If you call out for insight, raise your voice for understanding. If you seek it like silver, search for it as for hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. And here's the great idea here, this concept of knowledge. We talk about this all the time, the importance of this, but the Hebrew word there literally means a focused attention on learning. This is not so much an informed mind, but a relationship that takes place. And this relationship begins with God and then comes out and spreads out in a web to all of the people that we're about and with. So the issue of knowledge is one where we are focused on learning, but it begins, as we always say, as a relationship with God, but then the relationship with other people is huge and important.
Unbelievable. So why is education so important for the future of any culture, including America? And right now, we need it bad.
Isn't that the truth, man? This is the key idea that I keep throwing out to people just to see how they respond to this. I'll say to them, why should any group of children defend a country if they've never been taught about that particular country, if they don't have any past to go on, if they don't have any history, they don't have any knowledge. So if you don't have any knowledge about anything, then why should you care about it? If you don't have knowledge about history or math or science or whatever it might be, then you don't really care about it because you don't know the answer to the why question.
Yeah.
So the why gives us the purpose and the meaning, and this is the reason why we're having this discussion.
You know, and we speak on this all the time, and the first principle of education for me, it's always understanding connectivity.
Yes.
If people don't have a connection to what it is you're trying to put into their mind or educate them about, then they won't retain it. That's not Harold Bell talking. That is scientific proof. And so I think a lot of times in this educational system here, you know, and we're going to open it up, we've got a lot of people teaching to a culture of people that they don't connect with.
Understand.
And then the kids don't connect with what they're trying to be taught. Right. And then you lose interest.
Right.
If we don't have, I mean, the first need of people isn't water, isn't food. The first need is to be loved and accepted and respected. That's the first dying need of mankind.
Yeah.
And so when you don't feel like you're a part of something, tendency is to kind of be blank.
Education consists of two things. Consists of content and communication. So you can be the greatest scholar on some subject or discipline and know your stuff backwards and forwards, but if you can't communicate with the audience that's in front of you, oh man, you are in deep, dark trouble.
Or, as Corinthians 14:19 says it, I would rather speak 5 words to reach the masses where they can hear me and understand me than 10,000 words and only a few can understand what I'm talking about. So that's it right there, since we lay in scripture.
Look at you down.
Yeah, look at me, Reverend Mark. Yeah. But no. And so with that being said, yeah, and you mentioned young people early, because this is the flat bottom, this is where it comes from. And then we talked candidly last week, and I saw you got beat up a little bit on social media about your show. How'd it feel?
Yeah, that's okay.
How'd it feel?
That's
you
all right.
felt like a brother last week, didn't you?
I didn't really care. You put this stuff out there because you want people to have a different point of view.
Yeah.
You want them to hear a different voice and say, have you thought about this from this perspective?
And now that we are a week removed and we're talking about this, and in the midst of a few more police action shootings this week, some of what Mr. Kaepernick is trying to do that opens this dialogue is, I think, going to be fruitful for our country, no matter what you feel about his decision to stand, put his hand on his heart or whatever. The dialogue has to be open, because there is a disconnect between what people think and what is really going on. So I just admire you for doing that. But you mentioned young people. So how does Proverbs relate to the discussion of helping young people learn?
Yeah, this is such a big idea for me. I've been a teacher for 30 plus years. I'm still teaching high school classes now. My concern, of course, is that we have an appreciation, not just for the educational system, but for young people as a whole, that we understand them as some of the most brilliant people we know. You and I talk about this on a regular basis, and I tell my teenagers this. I tell them, teenagers are some of the most brilliant people I know. I am just amazed every single week when I go and teach these classes. I teach World Lit and Gothic Horror Literature, and every single week these kids are coming up with these ideas. I'm thinking, and I tell them, man, I've never thought about that before. Yeah. That's a really cool idea, So you have to honor them and respect them and appreciate them where they're at. Sure, they got a lot of stuff to learn, and yeah, they don't know it all. But that doesn't mean that we hold them back or sometimes put them in a box or think that, they just need to be taught and just sit there and learn. No, they need to be involved in their educational processes. That's huge.
And what I find in this educational race, as I call it, because it's an educational race, where we have to find out how to connect with these young people. I don't think that our country's ever been through the dynamic shift in how we relate than we did when we went from the industrial age to the information age.
Right.
So now we've got a lot of older people with a lot of wisdom and knowledge still trapped in the industrial age, where they don't even know how to work the tools today.
That's right.
So if you don't know how to work the tools and don't take the time to go back, and then you expect young people to take your wisdom and your knowledge, you're lost, because what we have to do is figure out, how do we combine learning with the tools and skills that they have today based on our wisdom and knowledge that we, acquired over many of years. Yeah. And if we don't go back and learn what they're learning on, we're going to lose them. Like I said, it's not going to be a connection.
Yeah, you got to meet them where they're at. So this week, for instance, we were talking about the different kind of genres that there are in literature. Genre is a type or a form of literature. And I asked the students, is rap music? Is rap a form of music? And they all said, well, yeah, of course. But if I asked adults in a different setting if rap was music, they would probably say no.
Oh, that's junk.
Yeah, exactly.
That.
So they don't view that. But the whole point of this is that we appreciate the form, the structure. Here's something that comes out of this particular culture that we need to appreciate, at least, if not anything else, and say, yeah, this is something that people are using to communicate what they think is really powerful and important.
And speaking of powerful and important, if we don't want to believe rap is real and real, I remember a long time ago I heard one guy Quincy Jones he was the first to go back and say, let me go get these rappers and put them into this jazz genre where we can come together and fuse these two gifts. Yep. And Back on the Block was the name of it, and it was unbelievable. And at the end of the CD, he said, I don't know what you think, but rap is here to stay.
Sure.
He knew the culture of rap was going to evolve, and it was going to keep evolving, and it has evolved over the last 30 or 40 years in its own little genre, and it is here to stay. But if we don't know about it and we act like we don't care about it, guess what the young people we're trying to educate are going to think?
They will have no respect for us.
You don't respect me.
Yeah.
Why should I respect you?
Yeah.
And just like you said earlier, why is it relevant? Yeah. So to end this segment, how should Christians think differently about how young people learn in the midst of what we've just talked about?
Yeah. So this is what we talk about at Comenius all the time, the distinctiveness of thinking differently as a Christian. And actually that's where the word holy comes from. The word holy in Hebrew literally means to be distinct or different. So the question is, how are we different in the Christian community, in our Christian homes and churches? One of the key ingredients to this, I think, is from Deuteronomy chapter 6. And it emphasizes there in Deuteronomy 6 that you're supposed to walk with young people. You're supposed to be with them. When they go a different way you don't think is proper for them to go, you need to be there so that they hear your voice, see your actions. But we can't do that unless we're with them. So part of the issue, I think, for any people group is that we're with students in community. That includes pastors, that includes teachers, leaders, parents, it includes the whole community, and we view education as the future for our young people. We think about this as the next generation. We honor them and respect them. Doesn't mean that there's no discipline involved. It just means that we appreciate who they are.
Yeah, and I say it all the time. When it comes to principles, stand like that tree by the creek and, be firm. But when it comes to fashion, be tolerable and just open your eyes and watch, because everybody has a different flavor and a different taste. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to dive into different obstacles for education today. It wasn't like we knew it. We had a real big discussion the other day, and I was giving my opinion about the neighborhood. And we're going to touch on a little bit of that. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio. Dr. Mark Echo, Harold H.B. Bell. Education is the topic. Please tell somebody to tell somebody. It's easy to complain. It's tough to compete and get into the game. RadioNext.tv on the Cool Groove site. Dr. Mark Echo, Harold H.B. Bell, and we are back, and we are talking about a subject matter so near and dear to my heart. Education is the name of the game today, and we're talking about how it is relative to Warp and Woof Radio, and the premise that we always bring you on wisdom and life connecting using the principles of Proverbs. And before we get back into the second, we have to give a big shout out to your mother, my surrogate mother, Virginia Echo. We love you. And thank you for tuning in and supporting all the great works that we're trying to do here at RadioNext.tv. I mean that from my heart. But as we go into this second segment of education, we're talking about life and current events, Mark. And what are the educational obstacles for young people in education today?
Man, I'm telling you, Robin comes home. My wife, is second grade teacher, and she comes home and she tells me stories that rip my heart out. I could tell you some of these stories on air. I shouldn't and I won't. But some of the difficulties these little people are facing, these 7 and 8 year old kids, they're just bouncing around, sometimes between homes. They're certainly bouncing around between challenges. Some of them are dealing with issues that are not their issues, but they got to deal with it because adults have issues. Some of it is, the issues that you're dealing with sometimes is the issue of autism, ADHD, kinds of things that they're struggling with internally that are very, very difficult. Honestly, it's just such a struggle out there for every teacher.
And it's a struggle for every teacher. And then, we always have to break down. We talk about first the educational platform, and then we have to break down demographic and culture. We have to. We've got in the IPS school system, which is predominantly African American children, we've got low budgeting. We've got fractured families. We've got teachers that they don't connect with. I mean, so when you start adding all these things up, and then people will say, oh, man, y'all got to quit complaining. Well, no, we don't. We have to keep talking about it to make sure that people out there who are saying, okay, let me sacrifice a few dollars for educating like pretty much what I've done.
Right.
I have the skill set really to go out here and do whatever I want to do to make a big dollar. But, man, my primary concern is to make sure little African-American kids can see an upstanding guy doing some positive things the right way. Right. To hopefully that'll influence them to say, let me do what Mr. HB did.
Yeah.
And that's the only way to kind of fix this thing, because talk is cheap.
Absolutely. So
talk is cheap.
They need to see somebody that they can mimic.
Yeah.
I mean, this is actually, that's the Greek word for imitate. To mimic somebody is to imitate them, and that's what we really need. So we need somebody like yourself. Somebody like Robin, so any educator that's doing a good job out there making a difference in the lives of these young people, so they have somebody to look up to.
I'm telling you, right now in my life, your role models and people that have come in your life that have made life make sense. Mr. George Brown, my football coach at Arlington, he rode me. People said, boy, he's always on your case. But, man, that cat, he's 92 today.
Wow. Wow.
And loves me like his son. And when I mean that, he saw the way to get me to move was to challenge me. I could be challenged because I'm a monster. I'm not quitting.
Yeah.
So he knew that I have to challenge Jumbo, as he called me,
Yeah.
and he still calls me Jumbo. And so he challenged me and challenged me and challenged me. And then if he saw that he was challenging too much, he'd pull back and then compliment me. Just methodology of education. And so,
it's huge.
And we go in with these blanket educational programs, not understanding all of these little individuals, man.
And here's where we come back to what we were saying in the first segment. We were talking about the necessity of relational connections to young people. Your coach knew you because he spent time with you.
So I know what he can take. I'm not going to fracture him. I'm not going to crack him. I know that. And he used to make me be the captain. Right? Jimbo, go get the toy. I got it, because I'm like, I just want to be one of the boys. And he was letting me know right then. You want to be one of the boys, you're probably going to just be an average guy. But if you step out and go do something different, then you have an opportunity to reach your full potential.
Absolutely.
And to this day, I could care less about the crowd because of Mr. Brown, because, I'm an individual.
Sure.
I love taking care of people, but, man, the crowd, like who accepts you and who don't, or who praises you and who don't, I could care less. But that is one of the biggest things, I think, in educating our young people today is really the relationship side that we've lost, I think.
That's right.
And we need to get back to it, find out who our young people are, and then you'll know how to feed them.
It would be wonderful if, the teachers could live near or next to even their students so that their students could see their teachers outside of school. That would be a huge deal.
That would be huge because, and even as we mentioned before, police officers.
Yeah, same thing.
They see these guys in uniforms with this gun on their, but they are human beings, and if they can see them in a different light, then it might make more sense into why they are like they are and have to do what they have to do, and then the respect factor will be built knowing.
Goes both ways.
I see what this guy's dealing with. Yeah, it goes both ways. So give us some examples of the current context or culture in education, if you could.
Sure. Honestly, the current culture and context in education is talking about stuff that we've been talking about for the last 3 or 4 millennia. Thousands of years we've been saying the same thing in education, and people are. It's almost like folks are just discovering something brand new. And I'm talking specifically in the last 7 to 10 years, educators have come back to what they refer to as project-based learning. Now, project-based learning simply means that you give students an opportunity to go hands-on, to discover what they're, you've directed their learning. That's your job. Now you let them discover things. So here's just an example of this. When I was teaching in high school back in the 90s, I would have students create an environment in a shoebox. They had to do this in partnerships. And so it could be something fantasy, sci-fi, it could be reality. But whatever they had to do based on Genesis 2:15, which is you had to provide something from your environment, then you had to protect your environment, both things at the same time. Well, that's a project-based learning process. So you want students to get out there and discover this stuff for themselves. You don't want to listen to me talk at you for 45 minutes an hour. That's not cool. So you want to engage young people in a way that's going to get them invested and involved.
It's so interesting that you say that because the value of what we consider an education versus what the truth is so different. I watched the standardized testing.
Don't get me started.
I watched the figureheads at the top.
Yeah.
Keep rolling out this information, and for some reason, the people who it matters to the most aren't even included in the equation of how we're going, what real education is.
Right.
And as you mentioned, hands-on education, listening to your instructor. I think the number one thing that we miss is teaching vocabulary in the box, so to speak.
Sure.
Every room you go into in life, if you walk into the sports arena, there's going to be a vocabulary to athletes that is different than any other language you're going to hear in your life.
That's right.
When you walk into the medical profession, you're going to start picking up vocabulary that if you don't know it, you're lost in that environment. Right. Same way with education, same way, with construction. Anything you go into, there's a language. And I don't think we spend enough time doing vocabulary.
Oh, isn't that the truth?
What does this mean inside this room that you've walked into?
I had a young person sit with me once. He was talking to me about why I made them learn big words. This is funny. So he's sitting there, and I said, no, because I knew he was in vocational education. I said, what are you studying now? He said, well, we're studying what's under the hood. We're dealing with car engines. I said, have you used a micrometer yet? And he said, oh, yeah, we're measuring the pistons. And he stopped mid-sentence.
And understood where you were going.
And he exactly knew where I was going from. And he had this big smile on his face. I understand now.
Back to what we've been talking about, connected learning.
That's right.
If you are wanting to really best have somebody know what you're talking about, how can you create analogy and metaphor? Or whatever, relative to what they are and what they do. Right. Because if I've got a little hip hop kid, I'm talking in the content of hip hop and putting your song together. What if you were baking a cake? You can do it you can transfer that throughout the daggone curriculum, and we have to do better, I think, and that's basically what my ex-wife used to call it, learning through the curriculum. Math has some relevance to reading, and reading has some relevance to history, and history has some, and they all can be bled together if you do it properly, and create the connected parts where they need to be.
Interdisciplinary. That's what we're talking about.
There you go. On the last question of our second segment, Mr. Echo. How important is community in the development of young people's learning? What you do? Write these questions for HB, man.
So, just a couple weeks ago, I was down on 42nd Street with Pastor Hankerson, and he and I took a little trip over to School 105, and we sat with the principal and the vice principal, and they were getting ready for some big conference thing. We weren't interested in that. We just wanted to pump them up. We wanted to tell them about the kind of good work that they were doing. Wanted to let them know we appreciate what they're doing. We said, what can we do? They said, well, we're doing this and that. You could bring these things. We said, great. And then Pastor Hankerson started talking about some of his people that are in his church. Now, his church building's right behind this School 105. Wow. And his people are going to this place, and the assistant principal and principal, their faces just lit up when he started talking about his people. And they said, we could not do, and they started listing XYZ, we could not do it without these people involved, and they're all coming from your church.
Yeah.
Right behind us. So this is not rocket science, people. Just be involved in the place that you're at. Shed a little light in the darkness where you're at. That's what we're talking about.
As you know, I my favorite show at Radio Next, and I love you, and I love the Jumbo Love Show, and I love all these shows, but my favorite show at Radio Next just happens to be my show I do at the YMCA every Thursday. These young people are so, as you mentioned earlier, they are so incredible. They are so bright.
Yep.
They are so adventurous and taking chances and wanting to, learn more. And I'm around them every Thursday, and I'm finding out I'm learning more from them than they're learning from me.
That's right.
On one hand. Mm-hmm. On the second hand, consistency and being around young, you would be amazed. Like you say, you don't have to be a genius if you just show up. Mm-hmm. If you show up and they know you there, man, that to them, because most of these young people today, you have to remember, Mark, have been abandoned in some way, form, or fashion, either by a father, by a mother and father, by the educational system, by whatever. They've been abandoned, and abandonment is one of the most hurtful feelings that we don't talk about. It's one of the most abusive things that people can have, especially when they're young. And so when you get to show up every week and they see you and they come running towards you knowing that you're there again, it's like wow, this is pretty much what you have to do. So I think as we continue to move forward, working with our young people, we've talked about this before, if you're not compassionate about the seriousness of giving,
that's right,
get another gig.
Yeah, exactly.
Do something different. Nobody's going to condemn you for it, but don't say I'm walking in this arena and then acting like people that you're servicing are getting on your nerve or you don't have time or whatever.
That's what I love about doing this thing with high school students, teaching every week. I know college professors, who, when I tell them I teach high school classes, they kind of look at me with this blank stare like, what in the world are you doing that for? But this is where the alivement is. I think I just made up a word, alivement. This is where things are moving and popping and shaking. This is where they have their passion, and you see it come out of them, and you want to connect with it. That's why when I talk about teaching learning, I put a hyphen in the middle of teaching learning. I don't talk about teaching and learning because that's separating it. I put them together. So what you just said, teaching going one way, but learning going the other too.
Exactly.
You're doing that thing going on.
And old people, if you're out there listening, if you want to get a shot of being young, go around some young people.
Absolutely.
Go around some young people, and you will feel the energy level that they give you is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the respect that they just innately have. But you have to command that. I mean, I can't go in an area with 13, 15, 17-year-old kids and then act like I'm their buddy.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm right. Mr. HB. Mm-hmm. I'm here for your betterment. Mm-hmm. And once we get that attached, let's have some fun.
That's right.
So we're going to come right back in our third segment. We're going to talk about how to get our Christian community engaged, and we're also going to wait for the arrival of Mr. Ron Baumberger. And Apprentice University is what we're talking about. Entrepreneurs, you better get it up, because we're coming at you today on Warp and Woof Radio here on the RadioNext.tv Cool Groove site. RadioNext.tv on the Cool Groove site, and we are back. We are entering the last segment of our first hour, and we were just blessed to have come in, founder of Apprentice University, and Dr. Eckel will be talking to him on the second portion of this Warp and Woof Radio show. But we are in the last segment of the first hour, and we're talking about connect our Christian community and how do we become engaged. Mark, tell us about some of the writings on education and the title of your next book.
Sure.
How does this relate to education?
Yeah, the title of the book is Up Against the Lockers, and the subtitle is Teaching, Learning as Christian Practice. And the idea is I'm telling experiences, so every single essay in the book is based on something that's actually happened to me. And something happened to me this week that I'll just mention because it connects to the question. One of the young people that I taught back in the day, back in the 90s, she never wanted to listen to me. She always told me where to get off. She was that kind of person, just kind of a rebel at heart. And there have been so many young people like her who have come back to me after 10, 20 years and said, I just wish I'd listened to you. I wish, there had been something different that had taken place in my life then. Well, this young person had come back around a few years ago, and we were talking again, and she was appreciating what was going on and so on. But what was sad, of course, this last week is that she just passed. She had it was a real sad physical situation. And so, about 3 hours north of us here in a little town in Michigan. But nonetheless, she was telling me right up to the end how important the teaching was, how important the life was to imitate and those kinds of things. That's what I would say generally, maybe to this whole segment, to make it very specific. And that is that this teaching learning thing goes both ways, and there's a relationship. Once you're my student, you're always my student, and I'm always your teacher, and that thing just...
And I have heard, if I haven't heard one, I haven't heard 10 say that.
Yeah.
That have come in on your show of the young people that we had,
Sure.
and even the ones who are grown now.
Yeah.
Continue to mention, you're still my teacher.
That's right.
And I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. How important is it, Mark, to change with the needs of the times? And we kind of hit on that earlier. Educational conditions are different for our children, and we mentioned the demographic and what they're up against. Talk about that.
So I talk about being nimble all the time. That's my word. I tell educators and leaders they need to be nimble. That means they need to be flexible, move with the times. I sat with somebody for Comenius this week. I sat with them over at Kavanaugh Hall on the campus of IUPUI. Here's this young lady who's into informatics, which is basically cybersecurity. And she's really into this. She wants to become an FBI agent. It's really cool, all that kind of stuff. This is what she said to me when we were talking. She said, "You are the only adult who thinks that what I'm going to do or what I'm really interested in is really cool. You are the only adult." Now that really says something. Of course, I don't think that that's really the case necessarily. But what I do think she's saying is, I really appreciate that you're willing to come and listen to me, because that's pretty much what I do for a whole hour. I listen to her tell me stories, what gets her pumped up, So that's what I tell people all the time is you just need to flow with the students, where they're going, and get interested in what they're interested in.
I had mentioned a couple of weeks ago we had the pleasure of doing the Community Day, the partnership between Cathedral High School and Arlington.
Yes.
I was talking to Dave Worland, their principal over at Cathedral, and we were just making, it was, one of those yaha moments where, you're making the connection of what really needs to be done. And he was appalled at some of the lack of technology, the tools of technology that Arlington has available, the lack of some of the athletic facility that they have. And then, it's like I was saying before, how do we expect competition on a level playing field when the playing field is so unlevel?
That's right.
And so in my quest to help educate, I am always trying to take a lot of the young people, the at-risk people, out of the environment they know and into an environment that they can see that there's hope. To still want to, take education serious, because if all you see is what you know, and what you know is a dark cloud, then you're going to live in a dark way. And so if you take them out and let them experience some other things, let them see some other things, then that turns that light on a little bit. And we have to do more cross-pollination, as I like to call it, because I think that there would be a great benefit for the Hamilton Southeastern Student or the Park student to go over and tutor and help mentor at Arlington, so they could see what their brother is dealing with. I mean, because if now you can be a little bit more conscious about, what if I only had this kind of resource to enhance my educational career? Right. So, it makes a difference. So I think we have to really do more of this as we move forward. How can we get people to come together, as you do every day? Go meet, get outside that comfort zone. Get outside
that box, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, last question as we move forward. What are your favorite movies and documentaries on educational issues?
So I'm just going to mention two. I'll mention a documentary that really deals with the crisis, I think, in the inner city communities. It's called Waiting for Superman. It was done a few years back, and here are these little ones. They're waiting for this, basically a lottery to see if they get picked to go to into this school system. I'm telling you, if your heart doesn't get ripped out of your chest, I don't know if you're breathing. You know what I'm saying? And then the other one, the one I tell everybody about, is The Emperor's Club with Kevin Kline. I think it's one of the greatest education movies of all time. Mostly because I agree with it. Maybe that's the reason why. But there it is. There it is. So I'm looking forward to hearing what Ron has to say here in this next segment. Maybe he'll be gracing us with some of his movies. But actually, I'm kind of interested in hearing about the pig farm. And that's going to be one of those things we're going to talk to Ron about in this next segment.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for letting me just participate in this first hour. 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 Just participate. This is near and dear to my heart. I would like to say one of the best educational movies I saw was Coach Carter. Oh, just off the top of my head.
You had to go with Samuel L., didn't you?
Man, come on. I mean, because as far as being from an urban community and in an urban high school, that is how brothers teach, man. I mean, really. I mean, the way I told you before, I'd get kicked out of a school if I, did what I do when I'm working with my young brothers. Yeah. Because there's a way that I have with them that they accept it, they love it, they embrace it. Yeah. Love hard is what we call it. Love hard, because some of them have no discipline skills. And I'm saying, okay, you're going to be disciplined, but I'm going to love you. Yeah. But let's do it. We're going to come back and we're going to find out much, much more from Mr. Ron Brumbarger and the Apprentice University on RadioNext.tv and the Cool Groove site. Stick and stay.
Is this stuff? Yes. You do a lot worse than
that.
And
we are back, RadioNext.tv on the Cool Groove site. And just have a very, very great show today going on, talking about education. And now we're going to move forward, because if you get a good education, then you can become your own boss. I know all about it. Please, if you could, Mark, take your time to remind us about what the Bible says about education before we introduce Ron to the show.
Sure, yeah. Well, it's just real simple. Knowledge and education begins with the fear of the Lord, and that's right out of Proverbs. This is what we emphasize every week. And we're really focused again today on the issues of education. And we brought the entrepreneur extraordinaire into the studio today. Ron Brumbarger is here. And man, you have been around the town. You know a few people here and there. So tell us a little bit about your life, your family, things you've been doing in Indianapolis.
Sure. Well, thanks, Mark. Appreciate you having me on. I wore my favorite shirt for your radio show today. So I've been blessed to know a lot of people in Indianapolis and been self-employed for 25 or 6 years now. And through that process, you build a pretty rich network, and you do get to know a lot of people very well. And you, in that process of building that network, you also get to experience some really quality people that you get to know. And I've been fortunate to have done that. So my first business I started here, Bitwise Solutions, still going and thriving and doing very well, based in Carmel. We're the oldest firm. I'm not sure that's a good adjective to say these days, but we've been in the web development business 22 and a half years.
Wow.
And we've been around so long, we built the city of Indianapolis' first website and Anthem's first website. If that tells you just how long we've been at it. Just yesterday I found a little old magazine clipping in our office that was a clipping from 1995, the spring of 1995, that was our first client in Indianapolis. We've been doing the work for about a year prior to that. So we blessed to know a lot of people and have a rich network. We grew up in a little town of Frankfort, just north of here. My parents are still there. You had my wife, also known as my spousal unit, as we share back and forth. I hope she's listening today. You had my wife on. She was your second guest, I guess, a few months ago. And I know she enjoyed her time here. And we have two boys. They're both off and running in school and learning at the same time. So
Tanner and Hudson, you got to give a
Tanner
shout
and
out.
Hudson, Tanner's a junior at Indiana Wesleyan, and having a great time there, doing a really good job. I think that particular program he's in fit him like a fine Italian glove. Hudson, forever to be a pilot, is studying the Vincennes Aviation School over by the airport.
That's great.
So he's neck deep into that program and one of the top performing students.
Oh, I'm not
so
surprised.
far. So I'm
not
very
surprised.
proud of my two boys for sure.
Well, the apples don't fall far from the tree there, you know.
Well, I guess
That's
I appreciate
good.
that. Thank you.
That's good. I remember when Tanner asked me to write a recommendation for him being in the honors school, and he was concerned specifically because, and this gets to the issues that we're really after here today about being an entrepreneur within education. He was concerned that he might not fit because maybe he didn't know as much as other people and stuff like this. And I still have the letter that I wrote to IWU, Indiana Wesleyan, about him, saying he is the kind of guy who's going to make all the connections happen. He's going to be the kind of guy who goes out and reaches people. He's going to be able to talk to people that all of these other people that really live in the side of their own heads, they really need somebody like Tanner to do this kind of thing for them.
I agree. I agree. When we love to travel, and we have a motorhome, we travel a lot. 6,800-mile road trip this spring to the West Coast and back. And I remember when our boys were very young, Cindy and I talked about how do we ensure that our boys have the biggest perspective possible. And I think travel is a big part of that, and creatively teaching is a big part of that. We homeschooled both our boys. Tanner from third grade on, and Hudson from kindergarten forward. And we'd study something and get interested in it, and we'd just pack up and go see it. And we did all the colonies, the original colonies that way, and Civil War and so forth. And so we just don't know not to go touch it and see it and explore it that way. But the phrase that we landed on way back, and Cindy will remember this, was the state's motto for Montana, Big Sky, Big Sky Country. And I remember way back then we were coming out of Canada on a trip, and we said, this horizon kind of looks like how we want to teach our kids. And they were young then, 1 and 3. This is how we want to teach our kids, with this big horizon, as big a horizon as we can, so that they don't understand or know or even expect boundaries. So I'm excited to see where our boys will be in a few years. I think Cindy's done a good job. I'm the cheer section for her.
The connection of education, though, with what you're discussing is this discovery element. And so we were talking about this. In fact, one of our major segments in the first hour was about student discovery learning. How do you make that connection between student discovery and this apprenticeship, which we have yet to get into, but the apprenticeship concept, how to be an entrepreneur? How important is discovery learning for young people?
Well, I think we see a shortage of it these days. We see an abundance of do this, do that, instead of solve this, solve that. I'm not talking about an equation. I'm talking about a meaty, heady kind of a problem to solve a project. Mitch Daniels had an article, it was a little more than a year ago, in the Wall Street Journal. He talked about a survey that they'd done at Purdue, and it's an alumni survey, and the alums that responded to this survey said that the best part of their education at Purdue was based on a big project that they undertook and a mentor. Well, I happen to be a fan of President Daniels, our former governor, and I remember that survey and that study very well. And I think therein lies the opportunity for us and how we teach kids going forward. Is give them something audacious. Give them something that on the surface they look at and they think, there's no way I can do this. And then let them understand how you would eat an elephant, right?
Yeah.
One bite at a time, one piece at a time.
Yeah.
And peel that back for them to execute. And teach them how to do that. Teach them how to discover, instead of solve this problem. It's figure out what the problem is first and then solve it. So
that's right.
That divergent thinking that is missing so much these days is troublesome.
It
and
is.
It's interesting. I have lots of friends in the technology space because of my other firm, Bitwise, and one of the things that you see in all the journals these days is we've gone too far. The pendulum of STEM has gone just too far. And I have this little story I tell some people when I get a chance to speak, if I may.
Please.
It's the idea that we've done a really good job in STEM of teaching people how to connect dots. They're really good at dot connecting. And for that audience, and this isn't everybody, by the way, but they're really good at dot connecting. And for that group, the dots land on their tray and they stitch them together in an artistic and creative and professional fashion, and then they push the tray to the next person that does whatever it is they are to do with that tray full of dots. The person doing the stitching of the dots has no concept necessarily of where did the dots come from. Are they in season? Are they out of season? Is there a supply issue? Who makes the dots? Do they come in different colors or sizes? What does it take to get a dot here? What's the cost per dot? Right? And how much do you sell my assembled dots on the other end? So we do a really good job of connecting dots, but God forbid somebody puts a marble on that tray. And what do? How do you stitch a marble together? It's not a dot. And so we have to train that mind. And STEM, while useful, can't be the end all.
Right.
We have got to train that critical thinking.
And just for the sake
process.
of understanding, STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, but that's okay. But now there are some people who are saying let's put some STEAM in STEM, so they want to put the A in the middle for the arts.
Right. And I get that, and I applaud that, and I think that's a great idea. But I do think that there's more than just another slice to the pie.
Okay.
I think we have to support programs that train the whole mind, not just the assessment, the technical side of the mind.
So something you mentioned just a moment ago is a word I use all the time in education, which is the concept of tools. And when you think about teaching young people tools, what are some of the essential components of what they want to have in their tool belt?
Well, first and foremost is experience.
Okay.
Nothing matters if you don't have experience. And so how do you get that, right? How do you get that? Is the conveyance of an apprenticeship or the conveyance of a master and a mentee, for example. There are two great examples that I like to talk about when I talk about how to equip a young person. Is the first one most people will know, although I'm finding it slightly dated, but it's Karate Kid.
Oh.
Miyagi and Danielson, right? And so poor Daniel, wax on, wax off for days, taught the art of karate from a master, right? Daniel learned first the art of rigor, and he was ready to give up for a long time, but he trained well under the master, and that is evidence of a genuine apprenticeship strategy.
Yes.
Right? What's really intriguing is the conversation of Paul and Timothy. Can you fathom for one moment mentoring someone purely by letter, without a feedback loop, without a feedback loop, and it takes days for the message to get there, or maybe longer, assuming it does. Maybe it doesn't. You don't know. But imagine mentoring someone remotely purely by letter, that written under duress in many cases, as we know from Paul. That's the ultimate in hard mentoring. So I think mentoring is the tool that I like to use. The movie Stripes, I know you're a movie fan. The movie Stripes, the old guys teach the new guys. You remember when they're getting ready to go out on the parade grounds? That's critical that we do that to equip young students. The other piece, the other tool I think a lot about is this insatiable appetite to discover and learn. And so I wrote a book this summer, and I talk a lot about this idea of a learning disposition in the book.
Good.
That you have to be constantly in a learning disposition.
Yes.
And it starts with, it's a cycle, and it starts with study. Study. You have to understand the problem or the issue that you're about to attack. And the second step is try. And then the third, which I think we underrate, but we love at Apprentice University, is fail. Without failing, and you are a fellow of the Failure Institute, thank you. Without failing, you can't learn. There is no feedback. And so we like that three-step, then you adapt and you try again, right? And learn and adapt and try again. That cycle is critical to teach.
It sounds like something else we were talking about in the first segment. It's almost as if you were here, talking about these things. But the concept of being nimble, the ability to, you see an obstacle and you have these tools that are really powerful and important to utilize, and it's not exactly like you think it should be laid out. It wasn't exactly like your manager said it would be, or that somebody in the culture said, this is going to be the problem. No, there's somebody hit you sideways with something with this thing.
Yeah.
So you've got to come at this with this concept of being nimble or being flexible. Is that an important issue that you see in the culture?
Well, Mark, I think the nimble, agile, resourceful MacGyver.
Yeah, there you go.
We sound like TV junkies here, I guess. But if you think about MacGyver, the ultimate improv to solve a problem, right? And being self-employed for many years, I can tell you that you lay out your next quarter's plans and you lay out your budget, and the one thing you're confident won't happen is your plans or the budget. Everything else will occur, but it won't be what you planned for, and it for sure won't be your budget. But the importance of that resourcefulness, and to teach people what resourcefulness means. What does it mean to go get the answer? And if you can't find it, make it.
Yeah, exactly true. I'm thinking while you're saying these things that one of the great statements about military intelligence is that all the military intelligence goes out the window after the first 5 minutes of battle, because things change so quickly.
Yeah.
This is why I always get upset with people who get upset with military intelligence. Well, it wasn't exactly like they said it was going to be. Well, what did you think was going to happen
It's
anyway?
a fight.
It's a fight. Nothing goes exactly like, stand there while you let me hit you, that kind of thing.
Right.
Nothing could be further from the truth. You're going to appreciate this. I sat with a young man yesterday at lunch for Comenius, and we were discussing this upcoming career fair. And he said, would you help me with my resume? And I said, sure. And so we talked about all of these things, but here's the thing you'll love. The thing that we talked about, especially that was important to him, was about soft skills, about the importance of things like loyalty or commitment or being on time. Things like this people take for granted, Do you ever deal with those kinds of things, soft skills, in the folks that you're dealing with?
Oh, my goodness. Did you put that ball in the tee for a reason?
Yeah, there you go.
Can I have a new driver
Just
to hit that one?
man.
Okay, I won't even take a practice swing at that one. Yeah, that, quite frankly, I think that is somewhat the byproduct, we see this deficit in the soft skills, somewhat the byproduct of the STEM focus, right? And I don't want to sound like I'm bashing STEM,
not at all.
but we have got to teach those soft skills. And my students that have been part of Bitwise and our Bitwise Fellows program or the Master's Study, think about Micah Sample is one of the students that is sick of me saying this, but I frequently say, we're trying to have a civilization here, and we need you to contribute. But yeah, those soft skills are absolutely critical. And I've found, as I wrote my book this summer, that I have a lot of stories about just missing in action soft skills. The stories are overwhelming. You just can't believe it.
When does your book come out, by the way?
We're scheduled for an October 28th book signing party.
Okay.
Details will be coming out here soon. Follow us on Facebook, kind of thing.
Okay.
And LinkedIn and Twitter, et cetera, et cetera. So our plan is October 28th, but it's in final edits as we speak.
Great.
And we have a bow on that coming up here over the weekend, and we can say
nice.
Done, and
Good
then we
for
get
you.
on to the next step of
Yeah.
moving that downfield. So I'm
Wow.
really excited about it. It was a little harder than I don't know if it's harder than I imagined. I think it's more revealing than I imagined.
There it is. Writing
you're
is
really
hard.
exposed. You're really exposed when you're writing, because much of it's opinion.
Yeah.
And I had several places in the first draft where I said, if you disagree with this, just tear the page out. I really don't care, because I really don't care. So it really is an interesting process to go
Good.
through.
Hey, congrats on the book that's coming out.
Thank you.
Follow Ron on Facebook and check out what's going to come down the pike for him. We're going to take a short break here. Coming on back, you are at RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. You are listening to Warp and Woof Radio. You are listening to RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. This is Warp and Woof Radio, and we are here again with Ron Brumbarger. We are talking about the necessity of education, a different kind of education. And Ron, you are the founder and president of something called the Apprentice University. So tell us about the start of this university and why you did this to begin with.
Sure. Well, thanks again for having me on your show. Appreciate it. Appreciate your friendship for many
Absolutely.
years. Every business you speak to, from the Dollar General store across the street to the largest company in the Midwest, in North America probably, but certainly around here, the number one problem they face is the shortage of talent. By far, the number one problem they face is the shortage of talent, and we've seen this at Bitwise for a long time. And I have been very involved with different universities around the community for many years, and year after year I'd go through their surveys and say, this is what we need and this is what all my friends need. And they've gotten better, but still yet today the output from a technical perspective or from a readiness perspective or professional perspective just doesn't get to the bar that we need at a firm like ours. And bar is not overly high, but you're not stepping over it either.
Yeah.
And so I decided that I was growing tired of having the same survey and getting the same results. You know how that goes.
Yeah.
And said, well, phooey on that. I'm going to grow my own. And I've been fortunate to have encountered a lot of unique educational paths over the years. I started Indiana's first statewide virtual charter school of all things. The Master's Study that you're familiar with, that you teach with, and others. So I've been fortunate to be at that confluence of unique, creative, entrepreneurial, and education, and to have an opportunity to change and produce a different product. Hence the idea of sanding off the rust behind this concept called apprenticeships, and so let's bring it back. And it is the traditional way we used to learn. The newer way is the credit-based or the
Yes.
academic classroom model. And so we said, let's bring back the original traditional, the original Coke, if you will, and dust that off and resurrect it and apply it to the white-collar, high-demand, high-paying jobs of today and for the foreseeable future in technology and business and entrepreneurship. So that's what we're doing.
The issues that you're confronting, you had mentioned businesses, talking with whomever, whatever the business might be, saying we need people that we can't find in the college community. Why do you think that this is the case today? You mentioned the credit-based educational system. What needs to change, generally speaking?
Well, so a little history lesson.
Yeah.
If you do some homework around the origin of the idea of a credit, a college credit, if you go back to Andrew Carnegie, a name many have forgotten, which I'm excited this fall. I'm going to do a little personal bio study on Andrew Carnegie. I can't wait. I'll get my book out and do that, and I'm going to read for a while. But his agenda was to have his top execs continue in that learning disposition, like I talked about in the last segment, to continue learning and continue studying outside of the day job. But they were worried that they didn't have a way to measure the expectations and how much work was being done outside of the office, if you will. And so they came up with what became known as the Carnegie Unit. And some people might remember the term Carnegie Unit. And well, when Andrew was no longer in business, they decided, well, let's just call it something generic, credit. And that makes sense, I suppose. But in 2013, I believe it was 2013, the Carnegie Foundation kind of dug their heels in and they said, you know, the credit is derived from the Carnegie Unit and it was only ever meant, this is critical, it was only ever meant to measure time. Remember my definition of what Andrew did. How much time is he asking his executives to apply outside of work to continue studying? Today, a credit is still just that. It's a measure of time. It could be hours. We could call it hours. We could call it fractions of light years, but it's called a credit. And so higher ed trades in this currency called credits. They transfer, like you could transfer time, which makes no sense. Okay, if you could, I would love to get some of yours and borrow some for a while, but you can't transfer time. And so we've become accustomed to thinking that if you simply stack up enough credits that you've become well educated or you understand the content. And if you stack your credits high enough, you'll get a degree. Well, it's only a measure of time. And learning was a choice that you make each step along the way. It's not, I have credits, therefore, or I have a degree, therefore, I'm sufficiently prepared, or I represent the body of knowledge that I studied, and I have a degree in that particular subject. Learning was a choice, and it doesn't always occur. You don't have to go very far to find evidence that someone can have a degree and having learned little as a result.
I feel like a bobblehead doll over here, just shaking my head up and down, agreeing with everything you're saying. So you mentioned this connection between education and choice. So let's talk, or make a segue at least, into what you've emphasized, which is the emphasis on calling. What is important when you think about calling in relationship to apprenticeship and the necessity of thinking about calling instead of time or credits or the Carnegie Unit or whatever?
Sure. Well, in our world, our promise to our students at Apprentice University is the access to, while they're doing their apprenticeships, while they're part of the program, and as they face what we call judgment. We don't have graduation, we have judgment day. So they have to go through judgment day at the end, but it's our promise of access to that network of professionals. And that's a big difference than you would find of obtaining a degree. So we like this concept of calling, and we define ourselves as a competency college. You see that word popping up a whole lot these days. Apprenticeships popping up a whole lot more these days. I think we had a little bit to do with that.
I think you did.
We're certainly just more aware, but we certainly had something to do with that. But we define our calling. I'm not much of a mission vision guy. I think it's a lot of academic, no offense, my friend, but a lot of academic exercise and business plan exercise and cannon fodder in some cases. But I like to say that our calling is to enable our students to leap from our collective shoulders. And by collective, meaning all of our mentors they work with, our staff, our community that are part of and friends of Apprentice University, et cetera, to leap from our collective shoulders into their career. Unlike a traditional, or the new traditional, program of stepping off of a stage with a degree. Universities today are in the business of preparing students through a degree process. Everybody knows how that works. They're not necessarily gearing their students for career readiness. We're all about 110% career readiness. Make no bones about it. It's all about a career. And we're not playing games. It's just how it works. There are some soft skill elements into that to make sure that you're successful in that career, but we're not about filling hours for credits to make up that degree. So that's what we call our calling, is leaping from our collective shoulders into their particular career.
And their focus then is on their passion, on what they've been gifted to do as unique individuals.
We actually have a whole program called Orienteering. It's all about helping a young student understand their calling. That Venn diagram, right, where those circles intersect of their calling, their passion, their interest, their experiences, what God would have them do, and additionally to help enlighten them beyond the obvious. You know, the obvious, I'm looking over your shoulder at a lighthouse. It's a great example. That lighthouse, if you get too close to that lighthouse and you're in a ship, you've got a mess, right? But we also know that if you get right up to the base of that lighthouse, you got a real mess, right? But from a distance, that's all you see. And you see that is the trophy, just, you know, in this case, a void. But in the case of a career, someone says, I want to be in computer science. And they pursue computer science, hopefully with fervor, and pursue computer science. What they miss is that there are an abundance of careers, equally or better paying, perhaps more rewarding for their particular character and DNA than computer science degree. But that's not taught. No one teaches that, right? No one teaches, look at all these other opportunities that are out there. So we get serious about that with our orienteering process. We get real serious about, now you can see the peak called computer science, but there are a whole bunch of other peaks right beside it that are equally or more valuable to you if you just take time to discover those.
This reminds me of, again, something we were talking about in the first hour. One of our students at Comenius, in fact, a graduate from the master's study, was sitting with me, and she's all into computers. Last year she was really doing all kinds of programming and so on. She wants to be an FBI agent. So she's kind of moved her focal point into informatics, which is about cybersecurity. Well, this is just a no-brainer because this is what she loves. You know, this is her thing. She wants to be an FBI agent someday. Why shouldn't she pursue something that she's really interested in? So this whole concept behind apprenticeship seems to be a real valuable direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I happen to know that young lady quite well. We were mutual friends with her. But I would agree. You know, we talk a lot about the percentages of about 40% of the students that start a four-year degree finish in 6. So let's just, for sake of math, say half, just to keep it optimistic. And we know that the half that go to college is we sort of call the 11th commandment, thou shalt go to college. But the half that go that don't finish, what happens to them? You know, I did some school here or some school there. And we know that it's not for every kid. And yet we shove them on the treadmill and we turn it up on high speed and we go run into that process called college and come out the other end well prepared, even if it's not for them. And so we think that competency or that hands-on learning, that do-it learning is equally or maybe even more valuable these days than a traditional degree. You know,
Sure.
I hear no employers, none, say, what's your degree when they start an interview. Every employer says, what have you done that's similar to what I need and how much do you cost?
Yeah,
That's the question.
sure.
What have you done that's similar to what I need and how much do you cost?
Well,
Those are the two questions.
That, I mean, leads into the obvious next question, which is, how have business leaders around this community responded to this direction you're taking with Apprentice University? Maybe you could give us an example or two of that.
Absolutely. One of our companies, T2 Systems, here just up the road in Keystone, they make parking meter software and products around the world. They do really very robust business. Their appetite for our students is a bit overwhelming. They tend to want to gobble us up pretty fast. We also have right over here, Developer Town, technology firm as well that loves our students. Bitwise, of course, imagine that, is always seeking to bring our students on board, and others as well, and not just in technology. We've current newspapers that likes to have our students on to write, because we work a lot on writing. Stratosphere Quality in Noblesville, a fairly large multi-state, multinational firm now that loves having our students involved there. And there are others too, but the adoption is that we realize, as businesses, we realize that the pipeline of talent is shallow, and it's not got the volume that we need. Again, number one problem facing every business is talent. And so the businesses are saying, I'm willing to put some skin in the game and train up future leaders.
Nice.
And I want to look at them before they graduate. I want to be able to get in on the ground floor, make them an offer they can't refuse, and put them on the team before they get out the door. We have other businesses too, by the way. Those were left off. I just don't want to go down the whole list.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Something that I was dealing with here this last week, or a couple weeks ago, maybe it was. There's a new nonprofit in town, actually, though new. It's been here for 3 years. It's called Wheels, City on Wheels, and it's a program under the auspices of Youth for Christ, where they're helping disadvantaged youth deal with working on cars and learning how to fix cars. Well, this guy told me, he said, one of our students came out, went to Napa, part-time Napa, and after 2 hours, the people at Napa said, you know your stuff. We're going to hire you full-time. After 2 hours of work, They hired him full-time.
Yeah.
Because they could see the evidence of this thing.
Right.
Yeah.
The other part of that, what have you done that's similar to what I need statement or question, is what character do you bring to the table? And we interviewed a young man just this week at Bitwise, and trying not to the whole book and cover thing, right? With 10 minutes into the interview, and I don't even know where he went to college, or if he did go to college. I don't really know. Frankly, I don't care. He demonstrated the ability to do the job that we need him to do, but he had character. He had character, and you could tell. You could push a little, and you'd get back really good responses. And I've done my share of interviews over the years, as you might imagine. So at the end of 10 minutes, I was done with the interview. I was ready to hire the kid. We made him sweat a little bit more, the young man. He's going to get a job offer any minute, by the way. But it was a fantastic interview, and you could just tell the character is there. And so we filter as much or more on character these days over academics. Character, and as kind of raw as it sounds, we like the Larry the Cable Guy test. Can you get her done?
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. Can you get her done? Can you do the job that I'm asking you to do? And can you do it with excellence and professionalism and get along with other children at the same time? Plays well with other kids.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I'm doing a keynote address here in a couple of weeks at a big convention of educators, and I'm dealing with this very issue of character because we have so much focus in our culture on cognitive and behavioral. What do you know and what can you do? But so little emphasis on who are you as a person. Can I expect you to show up when you're supposed to show up? Are you going to give me a hard time when I ask you to do something? Just simple disciplinary issues, but yet if they don't have that character developed in them, and this has got to be a part of the educational process.
One thing, just to touch on that for a second, one of the things I heard at a recent meeting repeatedly, and these people were hiring hourly laborer kind of roles, was their filter for hiring was get up, show up, and pass a drug test. Now that seems, sadly, kind of like the lowest common denominator that we should be thriving for.
Yeah.
I'd rather say get up, show up, excited, ready to set the world on fire, do your best, be innovative.
There you go.
Even if your job is repetitive, be innovative with it, but provide extreme customer service so people think about us and want to come back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever that job is, doesn't matter.
Does not matter.
Does not matter.
Well, I need to give you a little bit of time here to say some good things about what you've been doing. Apprentice University recently won a statewide award for innovation in education. So you need to tell us about that.
Yeah, so there's an organization that exists in many cities around the country called Centric, CENTRIC, and they have an annual innovation awards program. And just a year or two ago, I think it was 2014, so late 2014, we were awarded the Innovation of the Year in Education. The organization that won it the year prior was my friend Mitch Daniels at Purdue.
How about that?
So we are in good
You're
company,
in good company, yeah.
to be part of that program. But we were honored by them to be the winner in our educational sector for the creation of this creative idea called Apprentice University. So that's what we're up to.
That's really great.
Thank you.
So people are recognizing that this is an important issue, what you're doing at Apprentice University.
They are. You know, it's remarkable. We never turn down an opportunity to speak. That's what you do when you're a young body like we are. We never miss an opportunity to speak when we can, and it's increasingly we're increasingly hearing the chatter about, hey, have you tried this? And we're mindful that we are swimming up a stream. All the fish are going the other way.
Yep.
And the current is fast and deep and hard, and we're little bitty fish, and we're going the other way, and we're mindful of that. And it's a long proposition. It's a sobering proposition too, to think about the lives that we're changing every day. So we're mindful that we've got a long time to change what is a fairly deep-rooted system today, and that's okay.
Yeah.
We couldn't handle 10,000 students if they came. If your radio show brings us 10,000 students, first of all, we have a problem, right? But we couldn't serve 10,000 students. We're not geared to do volumes like that. It's a different model, but teaching through apprenticeships.
This issue of mentoring and so on, we were talking about, again, this in the first hour, we were talking about the imitation factor. And actually the word in the Greek is the word mimic. It's actually literally the word mimic is imitation. And so when you talk about discipleship or mentorship or imitation, you're literally mimicking what somebody else is doing, which is a really powerful idea and a powerful metaphor when you think about how that actually works in the framework of what you guys do. Putting people next to folks, and you're supposed to mimic what they do.
Absolutely. You know, all of our students start their you're going to go down this trail in a minute or two because it's a fun thing to think about and talk about. But all of our students start their apprenticeship, their first apprenticeship is at a pig farm up in Tipton. Our dear friend Keith Shopmer was Pig Farmer of the Year last year. And Keith, so if you're going to be, if you're going to play with the best, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so he won a national award last year. But all of our students spend their first 3 weeks there. And there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, if you're going to crack there, right? We need you to fail fast. If you're going to fail, get out before we get too far downfield. Secondly, we really want to inculcate the idea of rigor. It's 3 weeks. It's a long 3 weeks when you're 18 years old. But rigor is finish what you start and finish it with excellence. And so we really want to inculcate rigor. But the last element to that most people overlook is when I set that resume down in front of somebody and it says I spent 3 weeks at a pig farm on my first apprenticeship, I promise you that resume is going to get a little star by that item
exactly
on the resume. If nothing else, it's a conversation kindling to start the dialogue about what's this pig farm thing all about. Every student that's gone through it comes out the other side saying, I don't want to be a pig farmer, but wow, those guys work hard and they love their work. So that's pretty neat to see.
The connection to hard work is one of those things, again, that you really can't teach from a book. You just got to go do it. You got to go do it. Get your feet in the mud and all that good stuff. What lessons have you learned over the years which have served you best in your work?
Well, first of all, few things as an entrepreneur are easy. You can think, surely I can, sort of like a little car repair. You think, well, this can't be hard. This ought to be 15 minutes, right? And the next thing you know, it's a day. Well, being self-employed and being an entrepreneur is not unlike that. That few things are easy, and if it's worth it, it's worth it. If the success of completing that project or starting that business or helping that person grow in their career, if it takes effort, then put the effort in. and finish it with excellence. The other thing I've learned is you got to get up early. There's no sleeping in as an entrepreneur. You got to get up. You got to get up and you got to hit it hard and you got to hit it fast and you got to hit it early. And there's none of this sleeping in kind of thing. You know, I was kidding around the other day on Facebook about teaching a class on mollycoddling. And you know, the tagline is ensuring your child becomes a ninny. Now, of course, no one wants that, right? If anybody took that seriously, then realize that sarcasm does have a place, and it is sometimes fun. But the importance of understanding that work is hard, and it takes a lot of dedication and a lot of effort, and you got to push. You got to have the rigor to push through the hard times and enjoy the good times, because they don't stick around forever. But you have to know how to push.
Yeah. If learning wasn't hard, it wouldn't be effective or beneficial. The issue of excellence wouldn't ever show up, because if you don't know what rigor is, if you don't understand doing something in a robust manner, then that's just not going to make it for us.
Absolutely.
Anything? Any last comments or thoughts from you here today that you want to leave the audience with?
We're always looking for, we're always looking for motivated, resourceful students that want to explore a competency college model or a competency learning, the way Daniel did, the way Abraham Lincoln did, the way Henry Ford did, Ben Franklin. Those students that want to learn through a competency model and be taught by professionals in their careers. We're always looking for those outstanding students and families that support them. And finally, we're also always looking for businesses that want to help train up and grow future leaders for their own benefit as well. But appreciate you having me on and letting us talk about our program and what we've got going on and the many exciting things happening at Apprentice University.
Absolutely. And the podcast, for those of you who might have missed some of this, will be coming out later on this week in a couple of days. And we have the real joy of actually working for an entrepreneur here at HB Bell. We're grateful for his service to the community and for all of the good things that he's done and the connections he's made to so many different people throughout Indianapolis. This is Radio Next at the Cool Groove site. You are listening to Warp and Woof Radio. We will return next week from 10 to noon on Wednesday. See you then.